The dirt filled Rose's mouth first, then her lungs. She couldn't scream anymore because the earth pressed down on her chest like 1,000 fists, and the hands that had thrown her into this shallow grave belonged to wolves she'd known her entire life. Her packmates, her family, the ones who'd called her weak, called her cursed, called her the reason the moon goddess had turned her face away from the Clearwater Pack. "She brought the sickness!" someone shouted from above, their voice muffled by 6 feet of soil. "My pup died because of her. The rogue attack started when she came of age." Alpha Donovan's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Coincidence? I think not. The Oracle confirmed it. She's marked by darkness." Rose tried to claw upward, but her fingers met only more earth, more weight. The Wolfsbane seeds they'd scattered over her body before shoveling the dirt burned against her skin like tiny brands. She could feel them even now, pressing into her arms, her stomach, her throat. Wolfsbane killed wolves. Everyone knew that. It was why they'd used it, why they'd made sure to grind the seeds into her flesh before burying her alive. "I didn't do anything!" The words came out as barely a whisper, lost in the suffocating darkness. "Please, I'm innocent!" But no one heard. Or if they did, they didn't care. The Alpha's daughter, Octavia, had accused Rose 3 days ago in front of the entire pack. Octavia, with her silver blonde hair and her perfectly calculated tears, claiming she'd seen Rose performing dark magic in the woods, calling to rogues, whispering to shadows that moved on their own. It was all lies. Rose had been gathering herbs for old Miriam's arthritis, nothing more. But Octavia was the Alpha's precious child, and Rose was nobody. An orphan who'd been taken in by the pack out of pity after her parents died in a rogue attack when she was 5. The Oracle had sealed her fate. The old crone had looked at Rose with milky eyes and declared her tainted, touched by something ancient and wrong. The pack had dragged Rose to the burial ground at dawn, and she'd searched desperately for a single friendly face in the crowd. There had been none. Even Hannah, who'd shared Rose's sleeping quarters for 10 years, had turned away. The dirt stopped moving above her. They'd finished. Rose was entombed. Her chest convulsed, trying to draw breath where there was none. Panic clawed at her mind, animal and raw. She was going to die here, in the dark, alone, condemned for crimes she hadn't committed. The Wolfsbane seeds burned hotter now, burrowing into her skin like living things. She could feel them worming deeper, seeking her heart, her lungs, her very core. Then the pain changed. It wasn't burning anymore. It was growing. Rose's back arched as something split through her flesh from the inside. She would have screamed, but there was no air. Roots. She could feel roots threading through her chest cavity, wrapping around her ribs, puncturing her lungs. The Wolfsbane seeds were sprouting, using her body as soil, and the agony was so complete, so total, that her mind simply shattered under the weight of it. Darkness took her. When Rose opened her eyes again, she was still underground, but everything had changed. She could see in the absolute blackness as clearly as if it were noon. Her body felt different, lighter, stronger, wrong in ways she couldn't name. The roots that had grown through her chest were still there. She could feel them, but they didn't hurt anymore. They pulsed with a rhythm that matched her heartbeat, and when she exhaled, Something green and luminescent misted from her lips. Death. She was breathing death. Rose pushed upward, and the earth moved. Not because she dug through it, but because it simply parted for her, the soil flowing away like water. She rose from the grave like a ghost, like a revenant, like something that should not exist. The burial ground was empty now. The pack had finished their execution and gone home to forget about the cursed girl they'd murdered. The moon hung full and blooded in the sky. Rose looked down at her hands. They were pale, too pale. And when she flexed her fingers, she saw dark veins running beneath the skin like the branches of a tree. The Wolfsbane had changed her. It should have killed her. It had killed her. But somehow, impossibly, it had also brought her back as something new, something dangerous. She could feel it in her bones, the power that now sang through her veins. Where she stepped, the grass withered. Where her shadow fell, small creatures fled. She reached for the connection to her wolf, that inner presence that every shifter carried, and found nothing. The wolf was gone. Whatever Rose was now, she wasn't entirely werewolf anymore. What am I? Her voice sounded strange, layered, as if multiple voices spoke in unison. The forest around the burial ground stretched dark and deep. Rose knew she should run, should flee from Clearwater territory before someone discovered she'd survived. But hatred, cold and patient, had taken root in her chest alongside the Wolfsbane. They'd buried her alive. They'd believed Octavia's lies without question. They'd thrown away her life like it meant nothing. Someone would pay for that. But first, Rose needed to understand what she'd become. She needed shelter, safety, time to learn the extent of her transformation. The Clearwater Pack controlled this entire region of the Cascade Mountains, but there were wild places even they didn't patrol, places where rogues and creatures darker than wolves made their dens. Rose turned toward the deep woods and started walking. Behind her, a trail of dead grass and withered flowers marked her passage. She traveled for 3 days, moving only at night, hiding during the daylight hours in caves and hollows. The transformation had left her with new instincts, new hungers. She didn't need to eat, or rather, she no longer craved meat and blood like her wolf once had. Instead, she found herself drawn to dying things, to rot and decay. When she rested her hand against a tree trunk, the bark blackened under her palm, and she felt strength flow into her body as the tree's life force drained away. It should have horrified her. Instead, Rose felt only a grim satisfaction. This power was hers. No one could take it from her. On the 4th night, she reached the Thornwood, a stretch of forest so dense and twisted that even the bravest Clearwater warriors refused to patrol it. Stories said the Thornwood was cursed, that things lived there that predated the werewolf packs, ancient and hungry. Rose had always thought they were just tales to frighten pups. She didn't anymore. The trees here grew wrong, their branches reaching toward the earth instead of the sky, their roots exposed and gnarled. The air tasted of copper and old blood. Rose felt the Thornwood recognize her, acknowledge her as something kindred. This place understood death. So did she. She found a cave carved into a hillside, its entrance half hidden by thorned vines. Inside, the stone walls bore scratch marks from claws. Something had denned here once. Rose claimed it, and when she exhaled that green luminescent mist, it clung to the cave walls like fog, making the space hers. This would be her sanctuary, her fortress. But Rose knew she couldn't hide forever. The Clearwater Pack had tried to murder her, and Octavia's lies had condemned an innocent woman to a brutal death. Justice demanded an answer. Revenge demanded blood. She would give them both. Rose spent 2 weeks in the Thornwood, learning to control her new abilities. The Wolfsbane roots that threaded through her chest could extend outward, breaking through her skin to form barriers or weapons. When she concentrated, she could make plants wither with a thought, could pull the life from living things and store it within herself like a battery. The green mist she breathed was poisonous. She discovered that when a rat died within seconds of inhaling it, she was death given form, and the irony wasn't lost on her. They'd buried her with Wolfsbane to kill her, and instead, they'd created something far more dangerous than the scared Omega they'd condemned. On the 15th night, Rose heard wolves howling in the distance. Not Clearwater wolves. The pitch was different, the cadence unfamiliar. Curiosity drew her from the cave, and she moved through the thornwood like a shadow, silent and swift. The howls came from a clearing 1/2 mile from her den. Rose approached cautiously, keeping to the tree line, and what she saw made her freeze. A massive black wolf stood in the center of the clearing, surrounded by 5 others. Even in wolf form, Rose could tell he was an alpha. The power rolled off him in waves, making the air itself seem heavier. His packmates circled him in a defensive formation, all of them focused on something Rose couldn't yet see. Then the black wolf shifted. Rose had seen plenty of shifters transform, but this was different. The change happened in a heartbeat, flesh and fur rearranging so quickly it seemed like magic. When it finished, a man stood where the wolf had been, and Rose's breath caught in her throat. He was tall, easily 6.5 feet, with shoulders broad enough to block out the moon. His hair was black as ink, hanging to his shoulders, and his eyes, even from this distance, Rose could see they glowed amber in the darkness. He wore simple clothes, jeans and a dark shirt, but there was nothing simple about the authority he carried. This was a man accustomed to command, to obedience. This was an alpha who expected the world to bend to his will. "Show yourself," he called out, his voice cutting through the night. "I can smell you, little ghost. You've been watching for 5 minutes. Rose's heart stuttered. He knew she was there. How? She'd made no sound, left no scent trail that she could detect. But apparently, whatever she'd become, it hadn't made her invisible to this alpha's senses. She could run, should run, but something kept her rooted in place. Something that felt almost like recognition, though she'd never seen this man before in her life. "I mean no harm," Rose called back, stepping from the shadows. "I didn't realize this territory was claimed." The moment she entered the moonlight, everything changed. The alpha's entire body went rigid, his amber eyes locked on her with an intensity that made Rose want to both flee and move closer. Around him, his packmates tensed, hands going to weapons, knives, she noted, not guns. But the alpha held up one hand, stopping them. "Impossible," he breathed, and even from across the clearing, Rose heard the word perfectly. "You're..." He didn't finish. Instead, he moved, crossing the distance between them in 3 ground-eating strides. Rose stumbled backward on instinct, but he caught her wrist before she could retreat, his grip gentle but unbreakable. The moment his skin touched hers, the world exploded. Power surged between them like lightning, a connection so profound and absolute that Rose gasped. The wolfsbane roots in her chest flared to life, glowing through her skin, and the alpha's eyes widened as he saw them, saw her. "Mate," he whispered, and the word carried the weight of destiny. "You're my mate." Rose jerked her hand back, breaking the contact, but the damage was done. The bond had snapped into place, a golden thread connecting her soul to his, and she could feel him on the other end of it, his shock, his hunger, his absolute certainty. "No," she said, shaking her head. "That's not possible. I don't have a wolf anymore. I can't be anyone's mate." The alpha, she needed to know his name, needed something to call this stranger who just claimed her, tilted his head, studying her with those burning amber eyes. His nostrils flared, scenting the air, and Rose knew he could smell the death that clung to her, the wrongness that had replaced her wolf. "You're different," he acknowledged, and his voice had softened, losing its commanding edge. "But the bond doesn't lie. You're mine, little ghost. I'm Glenn, Alpha of the Shadowpine Pack." Glenn. The name resonated through the bond, fitting him perfectly. "Rose," she managed, her throat tight. "I'm nobody. I don't belong to any pack." "You belong to mine now," Glenn said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "What are you, Rose? What happened to you?" The question opened a floodgate. Rose found herself telling him everything. Octavia's lies, the false accusations, the burial, the Wolfsbane seeds sprouting through her chest. She told him about waking in the grave as something new, about the power that now flowed through her veins, about the trail of death she left in her wake. Glenn listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with every word. When she finished, his jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. "They buried you alive," he growled, and the sound made his packmates shift uneasily. "They murdered you for a lie." "I survived," Rose said, though the word felt inadequate. "I became something else." "You became mine," Glenn corrected, reaching for her again. This time, Rose didn't pull away. His hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing across her too pale skin, and the touch sent warmth flooding through the bond. "And anyone who hurt you will answer to me." Rose wanted to believe him, wanted to lean into the safety he offered, but she'd learned the hard way that safety was an illusion, that packs turned on their own without warning. "You don't owe me anything," she said. "The mate bond doesn't mean you have to—" "Stop," Glenn interrupted, his voice hard. "The mate bond means everything. You're mine to protect, mine to cherish, mine to keep safe. That's not a burden, Rose. That's a gift." One of Glenn's packmates cleared his throat awkwardly. Rose had almost forgotten they had an audience. Glenn shot them a look, and they immediately shifted back into wolf form and bounded away into the darkness, giving their alpha privacy. "They'll spread the news by morning," Glenn said, a hint of amusement coloring his voice. "The whole pack will know I've found my Luna." "Luna?" Rose echoed. "I can't be. I'm not—" "You're my mate," Glenn said again, as if that explained everything. Perhaps to him it did. "Come home with me, Rose. Let me show you what a real pack looks like. Let me give you the safety they stole from you." Rose looked at this alpha, this stranger who'd claimed her as his with such absolute certainty, and felt the bond singing between them, urging her to accept, to trust. Every instinct she'd developed since crawling from her grave screamed at her to refuse, to stay hidden, to trust no one. But the loneliness in her chest was vast and aching, and Glenn's eyes held no deception, only fierce protectiveness and something that might have been awe. "One condition," Rose said finally. "When I'm ready, you help me make Clearwater Pack answer for what they did." Glenn's smile was sharp and dangerous, all predator. "Little ghost," he said, "I'll help you burn them to the ground if that's what you want." The Shadowpine Pack territory was nothing like Clearwater. Where Rose's former pack had been rigid and traditional, Shadowpine felt wild and alive. The pack house was built into the side of a mountain, more fortress than home, and when Glenn led her through the massive doors, dozens of wolves stopped to stare. Rose could smell their shock, their confusion. She didn't smell like a wolf anymore. The Wolfsbane had changed that. Instead, she carried the scent of dark soil and crushed flowers, of things that grew in graveyards. Some of the pack members recoiled. Others looked curious. Glenn's hand rested possessively on the small of her back. "This is Rose," he announced to the gathered pack, his voice carrying through the great hall. "My mate, your Luna. Anyone who disrespects her answers to me." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, one by one, the pack members dropped to one knee, bowing their heads in submission. It was a formal acceptance, a recognition of her position whether they understood what she was or not. Rose felt tears prick her eyes. She'd never been shown this kind of respect, this kind of acknowledgement. In Clearwater, she'd been nothing. Omega trash, barely tolerated. Here, because Glenn had claimed her, she was instantly valued. The bond pulsed warm in her chest. An older woman stepped forward, her hair silver-streaked and her eyes kind. She didn't bow, but she did incline her head respectfully. "Welcome, Luna," she said, and her smile was genuine. "I'm Adelaide, the pack healer. If you need anything at all, you come find me." "Thank you," Rose managed, her voice rough with emotion. Glenn guided her through the pack house to his private quarters, a suite of rooms at the top of the building with windows that overlooked the entire valley. The space was masculine but comfortable, filled with books and maps and the kind of organized chaos that spoke of a man who actually lived in his space rather than just existing in it. "You're safe here," Glenn said, closing the door behind them. "No one will hurt you. I give you my word." Rose turned to face him, this alpha who'd claimed her so completely. The bond hummed between them, warm and insistent, but Glenn made no move to touch her, giving her space despite what she could feel through their connection, his desire, his need to hold her, to keep her close. "Why are you being so kind to me?" she asked. "You don't know me. For all you know, Clearwater was right to condemn me." Glenn crossed the room in 2 strides, taking her face in both hands. His touch was gentle, reverent, and when he spoke, his voice was absolutely certain. "The bond chose you," he said. "That means the moon goddess chose you. Whatever Clearwater believed, they were wrong. You're good, Rose. I can feel it in my soul." "I can kill with a touch," Rose whispered. "I breathe poison. How is that good?" "You survived something that should have destroyed you," Glenn countered. "You turned their weapon into your strength. That's not evil, Rose. That's power. And I'll help you learn to control it." Over the following weeks, Glenn kept his promise. He worked with Rose every day, helping her understand the extent of her transformation. She learned she could control when the death touch activated, could contain the poisonous mist to her lungs until she chose to release it. The Wolfsbane roots could be extended or retracted at will, forming shields or spears of thorned vine. Adelaide proved invaluable, her knowledge of herbs and natural magic helping Rose understand the symbiosis between her human half and the plant that had claimed her body. The Wolfsbane wasn't parasitic, it was part of her now, drawing strength from her life force while giving her power in return. The Shadowpine pack accepted her slowly, cautiously. Some were frightened of what she'd become, others were awed. But all of them respected Glenn's claim, and more importantly, all of them treated Rose like a person, something Clearwater had never done. She found herself falling into the rhythms of pack life, morning training sessions with Glenn, where he taught her to fight using her new abilities, afternoons in the garden with Adelaide, learning to coax life from plants instead of death. Evenings in the Great Hall, sharing meals with pack members who actually wanted to know her, who asked about her day and included her in their conversations. And nights. Nights were for Glenn alone. The mate bond grew stronger every day, the pull between them becoming almost painful in its intensity. Glenn never pushed, never demanded, but Rose could feel his restraint fraying. She could feel her own resolve weakening, the need to complete the bond becoming a physical ache. 2 months after arriving at Shadowpine, Rose made her decision. She found Glenn in his study, poring over territorial maps. He looked up when she entered, and the smile that crossed his face was warm enough to melt glaciers. "Rose," he greeted, setting aside his work. "What brings you here?" Rose closed the door behind her, her heart hammering. She'd thought about this for days, weighing her fear against her desire, her trauma against her trust in this alpha who'd shown her nothing but kindness. "I want to complete the bond," she said, the words coming out in a rush. "I want to be yours completely, if you'll have me." Glenn was across the room in an instant, his hands framing her face, his amber eyes burning with barely restrained hunger. "If I'll have you?" he repeated, and his laugh was shaky. "Rose, I've been waiting for you my entire life. You're everything I never knew I needed." When he kissed her, the bond exploded between them like fireworks, and Rose felt the final pieces of her shattered heart begin to heal. Glenn was gentle despite the hunger she could feel through their connection, his touch worshipful as he claimed his mate. The bite came at the height of their joining, Glenn's teeth sinking into the junction of her neck and shoulder, marking her as his for all to see. Rose expected pain, but instead, there was only pleasure and completion, the bond sealing into place with a finality that left her gasping. She bit him back, her human teeth not as sharp as a wolf's, but Glenn groaned his approval, holding her tighter as she marked him in return. When they finally collapsed together, tangled and sated, Rose felt whole for the first time since crawling from her grave. "Mine," Glenn murmured against her hair. "My Luna, my mate, my everything." "Yours," Rose agreed, and meant it with every fiber of her being. But even in her contentment, Rose didn't forget. Clearwater Pack still needed to answer for their crimes. Octavia's lies had condemned an innocent woman to death, and Alpha Donovan had executed that sentence without question. They'd thrown Rose away like garbage, and that debt remained unpaid. 3 months into her time at Shadowpine, Glenn called her to his study. "I've been making inquiries," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "About Clearwater. About what's happened since your death." Rose settled into the chair across from his desk, her stomach tight with anticipation. "Tell me," she said. "It's not good," Glenn warned. "After they buried you, the rogue attacks didn't stop. They got worse. The pack has lost 15 members in the last 4 months, including Alpha Donovan's son." Rose's breath caught. Marcus had been kind to her once, had slipped her extra food when the pack was in one of its moods to punish her. He'd been one of the few wolves who hadn't actively participated in her condemnation. "Marcus is dead?" she whispered. "Killed in a rogue ambush 2 weeks ago," Glenn confirmed. "And here's the interesting part. My scouts report that Octavia has been sneaking into the forest at night, meeting with someone." Understanding dawned cold and terrible. "She's working with the rogues," Rose said. "She blamed me for attacks she was orchestrating herself." "It appears so," Glenn agreed. "The question is, what do you want to do about it?" Rose stood, moving to the window that overlooked Shadowpine territory. Her territory now, her pack. But Clearwater still held a piece of her heart. The innocent pack members who'd been misled, who'd lost loved ones because of one woman's treachery. "We expose her," Rose said. "We make her confess. And then we let Clearwater Pack see exactly what they created when they buried me." Glenn rose, coming to stand behind her. His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her back against his chest, and Rose leaned into his strength. "Then that's what we'll do," he said. "But we do it smart. We gather proof first, make sure there's no room for doubt." Over the next 2 weeks, Glenn's scouts tracked Octavia's movements. They documented her meetings with the rogue Alpha, a vicious wolf named Talon who'd been terrorizing Clearwater's borders. They recorded conversations, gathered evidence, built an airtight case. When they had everything they needed, Glenn sent a formal request to Alpha Donovan for a territory meeting. It was unusual. Shadowpine and Clearwater had minimal contact, but not unheard of. Donovan accepted, likely curious about what the notoriously reclusive Shadowpine Alpha wanted. The meeting was scheduled for the next full moon, on neutral ground between the territories. Rose spent the days leading up to it preparing. She practiced with her abilities until she could control them perfectly, until the Wolfsbane roots moved like extensions of her own body. Adelaide helped her create a drat that would temporarily suppress the death aura she carried, making her scent more neutral. "Are you sure about this?" Adelaide asked the night before the meeting. "Facing them again, it's going to be hard." "I need to do this," Rose said. "For me. For everyone Octavia hurt. For the pack members who died because of her lies." The neutral ground was a clearing in the forest, equidistant from both territories. Glenn brought a small contingent of his best warriors. Rose could see Clearwater Pack arriving from the other direction, and her heart clenched when she recognized familiar faces. Alpha Donovan led them, his shoulders bowed with grief that hadn't been there 4 months ago. Losing his son had broken something in him. Octavia walked at his side, playing the devoted daughter, her face a mask of false concern. Rose stayed hidden in the trees with Adelaide, watching as Glenn strode forward to meet the Clearwater Alpha. "Alpha Donovan," Glenn greeted. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting." "Alpha Glenn," Donovan replied, inclining his head. "What brings Shadowpine to my borders? We've had no disputes." "No disputes, no," Glenn agreed. "But we have information that concerns your pack's safety. Information about the rogue attacks you've been suffering." Donovan straightened, suddenly alert. "You know something about the attacks?" he demanded. "Tell me. My pack has lost too many good wolves." "I will," Glenn promised. "But first, I need you to understand that not everything is as it seems. Sometimes, the enemy is closer than you think." Octavia shifted, a flicker of unease crossing her perfect features before she smoothed it away. "Alpha Glenn," she interjected, her voice sugary. "If you have information, please share it. We're desperate to stop these attacks." "Are you?" Glenn asked, and there was steel in his voice. "Or are you desperate to hide your involvement in them?" The clearing went silent. Donovan's eyes widened, and around him, Clearwater wolves exchanged confused glances. "How dare you!" Octavia cried, her face flushing. "I would never betray my pack." "My scouts have evidence that says otherwise," Glenn said. "Recorded conversations between you and the rogue Alpha Talon, documented meetings in the forest, plans to weaken your pack from within." "This is ridiculous!" Octavia turned to her father. "Daddy, he's lying. Why would I hurt our pack?" But Donovan's expression had gone carefully blank, the way it did when he was processing something terrible. "Glenn," he said slowly, "these are serious accusations. Do you have proof?" "I do," Glenn confirmed. "But before I share it, I want to tell you about a girl named Rose." Rose's breath caught. This was it. The moment she'd been both dreading and craving. Glenn continued, his voice carrying across the clearing. 4 months ago, a young Omega from Clearwater Pack was accused of dark magic and consorting with rogues. The accusations came from Alpha Donovan's daughter. The Oracle confirmed the girl was tainted. So Clearwater Pack did what they thought was right. They buried her alive with Wolfsbane seeds to protect their pack. Murmurs rippled through the Clearwater wolves. Some looked uncomfortable, others defensive. They all remembered Rose's execution. "But what if the accusations were false?" Glenn asked. "What if the real traitor used an innocent girl as a scapegoat? What if everything that's happened since, the attacks, the deaths, the loss of the Alpha Son, what if all of it happened because you killed the wrong wolf?" "You don't know what you're talking about!" Octavia's voice had gone shrill. "That girl was dangerous! The Oracle said—" "The Oracle can be fooled," a new voice cut in, and Adelaide stepped from the trees. "With the right herbs, the right preparation, a skilled manipulator can create the appearance of dark taint where none exists." Adelaide threw a small pouch at Octavia's feet. It split open, spilling dark powder across the grass. "Graveyard soil mixed with raven's blood and belladonna," Adelaide said. "Rubbed on someone's skin, it creates the exact signs the Oracle looks for when identifying dark magic. Rose was innocent, and you framed her." "Lies!" Octavia screamed. "All lies!" "Then explain this," Glenn said, and nodded to one of his warriors. The warrior stepped forward with a small device, a recording crystal, enchanted to capture and replay sound. When he activated it, Octavia's voice filled the clearing, clear as day. "The little Omega bought it completely. The Oracle declared her tainted, and my father had her buried by dawn. Now there's no one to connect me to the rogues." "You've done well, Octavia. With the pack weakened by paranoia, we can strike harder. Soon Clearwater will fall, and you'll rule alongside me." "As long as you keep your promise, Talon. When my father dies, I become Alpha, and you become my mate. We'll merge the packs under our rule." The recording ended. The silence in the clearing was absolute. Every Clearwater wolf stared at Octavia, with expressions ranging from shock to rage to heartbreak. Alpha Donovan looked like he'd aged a decade in the span of minutes. "Octavia," he whispered, "tell me this isn't true. Tell me you didn't—" "Daddy, they're trying to trick you." Octavia reached for him, but Donovan stepped back. "It's some kind of spell, some manipulation." "It's the truth," Glenn said. "And there's someone here who deserves to face you herself." He turned toward the trees where Rose still hid, and through their bond, she felt his encouragement, his pride, his absolute faith in her strength. Rose stepped into the clearing. The reaction was immediate and visceral. Clearwater wolves recoiled, some crying out in shock, others stumbling backward. They'd buried her. They'd watched her go into the ground dead or dying, and here she stood, very much alive, very much changed. Rose's skin was pale as moonlight, the dark veins visible beneath like tree branches. Her eyes, once brown, now glowed with a faint green luminescence. The wolfsbane roots were visible at her collarbone, threading through her skin like living jewelry. "Impossible," Donovan breathed. "You're dead. We buried you." "You tried to bury me," Rose corrected, and her voice carried that strange, layered quality. "You threw me in a grave with wolfsbane seeds and left me to die. But I didn't die, Alpha Donovan. I changed." She walked forward, and where her feet touched the ground, the grass withered. The Clearwater wolves scrambled back, fear naked on their faces. "You condemned me for crimes I didn't commit," Rose continued. "You believed her lies without question. You took everything from me, my home, my pack, my life. And for what? So your precious daughter could orchestrate a coup with rogues?" "Rose, we didn't know," Donovan said, and he looked genuinely broken. "If we'd known—" "You should have questioned," Rose cut him off. "You should have investigated. You should have given me a trial, a chance to defend myself. Instead, you buried me alive and walked away." Octavia, cornered and exposed, did the only thing she could. She attacked. She shifted in a burst of fur and fury, her blonde wolf launching itself at Rose with claws extended. But Rose was ready. The wolfsbane roots erupted from her chest, forming a barrier of thorned vines that caught the attacking wolf mid-leap. Octavia yelped as the thorns pierced her fur, and Rose felt the drain begin, her power pulling life force from the traitor who'd destroyed her life. "You took everything from me," Rose said, watching Octavia struggle. "Now I'll take everything from you." "Rose," Glenn's voice cut through her rage. "Don't kill her. She needs to face justice from her own pack." Rose wanted to finish it, wanted to drain Octavia until there was nothing left but a dried husk. The power sang in her veins, eager to feast. But Glenn was right. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about justice. She released Octavia, letting the vines retract. The blonde wolf collapsed to the ground, weakened but alive. "She's yours, Alpha Donovan," Rose said. "Do with her what you will." Donovan stared at his daughter, now shifted back to human form and sobbing on the ground. The grief in his eyes was terrible to see. "She'll face trial," he said finally. "For treason, for murder, for conspiring with rogues. If found guilty, the punishment is death." "Daddy, please," Octavia begged. "I'm your daughter." "You killed your brother," Donovan said, and his voice cracked. "You orchestrated the attacks that took Marcus from me. You're no daughter of mine." He gestured to his warriors, and they moved forward to restrain Octavia, dragging her away, still screaming protests. Donovan turned back to Rose, and there were tears on his face. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "I know it's not enough, that it can never be enough. But I'm sorry for what we did to you. You deserved better." Rose wanted to hold on to her anger, wanted to hate him. But looking at this broken alpha who'd lost his son and now his daughter, she found she couldn't. "I can't forgive you," she said honestly. "But I can accept your apology. And I can hope that Clearwater learns from this. That innocent wolves deserve justice, not execution." Donovan nodded, accepting her words. Then Glenn was at Rose's side, his arm sliding around her waist, pulling her close. The contact sent warmth through the bond, steady and reassuring. "Rose is Shadowpine's Luna now," Glenn announced to the gathered Clearwater wolves. "My mate, my equal. She's found a home with us, and anyone who speaks against her will answer to me personally." He pulled Rose tighter against him, then did something that made her heart stutter. In front of both packs, in front of everyone who'd condemned her and everyone who'd saved her, Glenn knelt. "You survived something that would have destroyed anyone else," he said, looking up at her with those burning amber eyes. "You took their weapon and made it your strength. You're the strongest person I've ever known, Rose. And I'm honored, so honored, to call you my mate." He produced a ring from his pocket, a band of silver set with a stone that glowed the same green as Rose's eyes. "Marry me," Glenn said. "Not because of the mate bond, but because I choose you. Every day for the rest of our lives, I choose you." Rose felt tears spill down her cheeks. 4 months ago, she'd been buried alive, condemned and alone. Now she stood above ground with a mate who loved her, a pack that accepted her, and power that made her untouchable. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, I'll marry you." Glenn slid the ring onto her finger and stood, capturing her mouth in a kiss that tasted like victory and promises and home. When they broke apart, the Shadowpine wolves howled their approval, the sound echoing through the clearing. Even some of the Clearwater wolves joined in, celebrating this ending, this new beginning. 3 months later, Rose stood in front of the Shadowpine pack as Glenn's bride and Luna. Adelaide had helped her prepare, weaving flowers through her hair, nightshade and hemlock and other poisonous blooms that Rose could touch without harm. Her dress was deep green, the color of new growth and old forests. When Glenn saw her walking toward him, his eyes went bright with unshed tears. "You're breathtaking," he whispered as she reached him. "My beautiful, deadly Luna." The ceremony was simple but profound. They exchanged vows under the full moon, promising to stand together through darkness and light, to protect each other and their pack, to love without reservation. When the pack elder pronounced them mated and married, Glenn kissed Rose with such tenderness that her heart ached with happiness. The bond between them blazed bright and golden, fully sealed, completely unbreakable. "Mine," Glenn murmured against her lips, "now and always." "Yours," Rose agreed, "now and always." The celebration lasted until dawn, and through it all, Rose felt the weight of her past finally lifting. She would never forget what Clearwater had done to her. The scars of betrayal ran too deep. But she'd found something better than revenge. She'd found a family who valued her, a mate who cherished her, and power that made her strong enough to protect them both. Word reached them weeks later that Octavia had been found guilty and executed for her crimes. Alpha Donovan had stepped down, unable to lead after such betrayal, and a new Alpha had taken his place, a fair wolf who'd been one of the few to question Rose's condemnation all those months ago. Clearwater was healing, learning to be better. And Rose? Rose was thriving. She stood on the balcony of her quarters one evening, watching the sunset over Shadowpine territory, when Glenn found her. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. Rose covered his hands with her own, the ring on her finger catching the dying light. "How they tried to bury me," she said. "How they planted Wolfsbane seeds in my grave, thinking it would be my end." She turned in his arms, meeting his amber eyes with her glowing green ones. "But instead, I bloomed," Rose finished. "I rose from death itself and found everything I never knew I needed. They tried to plant my destruction, but all they did was help me grow into something unstoppable." Glenn kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "My deadly Luna," he murmured. My beautiful nightmare, my everything. And there, wrapped in her mate's arms, surrounded by a pack that loved her, Rose finally understood that the best revenge wasn't destruction. It was living so well that your enemies could only watch and envy as you thrived. She'd been buried with Wolfsbane seeds meant to poison her, to end her existence. Instead, they'd sprouted through her chest and given her the power to breathe death itself. And she'd used that power to build a life worth living. Did you enjoy this story? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. We love hearing from you. Part 2 is available now, so click the link in the description box to continue the journey. Also, let us know where you're watching from so we can give you a shout out in our next video. Sending love to our amazing viewers from New York, Sydney, Australia, the UK, Canada, Belgium, California, Singapore, and so many more places around the world. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you never miss any of our captivating stories. Love, Aurora.